Chapter 1. When Honesty Got Rejected. I never planned to expose anyone. All I wanted was to tell the truth. But the night my boss rewrote my work, stole my credit, and called my video too real to sell, something inside me finally snapped. So at 1 in the morning, I uploaded the original cut from my tiny apartment in West Hollywood. No brand, no logo, just honesty. 12 hours later, it hit 500,000 views. By the next day, 3 million. Then a beauty influencer with 3 million followers watched it on camera and cried. And suddenly, the video my own company rejected became the one the entire country was talking about. What happened next almost cost Brandon his career and completely changed mine. My name is Ava Mercer, and this is how the truth I refused to bury became the most powerful thing I ever created. I was 35 when I walked into the 11th floor conference room of Orbit & Company, carrying the one thing I believed could finally shift the way we talk to women in this industry. I had spent 6 straight weeks living and breathing the concept for Lumera Skin's fourth quarter campaign, researching the exhaustion that American women had been quietly drowning in since the world shut down. Burnout had become a constant rhythm in their days, and no amount of brightly colored ads could mask the truth they were living. I wanted to show real moments, real skin, real fatigue. A woman sitting alone in her car outside a grocery store because she needed 2 minutes of silence. A mother looking at herself in the mirror late at night, trying to recognize the person staring back. A young nurse finishing a double shift, still in scrubs, washing her face slowly, as if wiping away the weight of the entire world. The video I created had no filters, no perfect staging, no overly cheerful soundtrack. It had breath. It had light that felt like Sunday mornings. It had women whose stories were written in the tired set of their shoulders. I believed the truth mattered, maybe more than ever. But Orbit was not built on truth. It was built on making truth easier to swallow. The room was already crowded when I walked in. Producers, planners, strategy leads. Brandon Hale sat at the head of the table, flipping casually through the printouts I had stayed up until 2 in the morning preparing. Brandon was 42, sharp jaw, polished smile, and a reputation for taking the safest route through any creative decision. He glanced at me as if he had already decided how this meeting would end. Claire Donovan, our CEO, stood near the window overlooking downtown Los Angeles. She gave me a polite nod, the kind reserved for people whose brilliance she appreciated only as long as it caused no trouble. I plugged in my laptop, pressed play, and let the room fall into the stillness of the first scene. The soft hum of a refrigerator at midnight, a woman rubbing her temples as she sat on the edge of her bed. The camera lingered on her exhaustion, not to dramatize it, but to acknowledge it. For a moment, no one said anything. I felt the quiet settle like dust. Then the comments started. "This feels too heavy. Are we trying to sell skincare or stage an intervention? Women don't want to see themselves like this." I had heard it all before, but it still hit like a dull bruise. Brendan leaned forward, tapping his pen against the table. "Ava, this is too real, too raw, too sad." He spoke slowly, the way people do when they are preparing a verdict. "This is not how you move product. You are leaning into something that will make consumers uncomfortable." I kept my voice steady. Women already feel this. All I'm doing is showing them they aren't alone. When a brand acknowledges reality instead of painting over it, people listen. Brandon smiled in that tight way he always did when he was about to undermine me. "It is admirable that you want honesty, but honesty does not sell. Not in this format. We need something lighter, something easier to digest." A few people nodded, not because they agreed, but because aligning with the loudest voice was safer than aligning with the truest one. Others kept their eyes down, hands folded, trying not to get caught in the tension. Emily, sitting near the back, looked at me with something close to fear, like she hated what was happening but had no power to stop it. Claire finally spoke. She chose her words carefully. The video has heart, but Lumera is expecting something uplifting. Fourth quarter is critical for them. We cannot risk losing momentum. Risk. That was always the word they used when they meant truth. I tried again. Women know when a brand is lying. They know when a message is manufactured. What we have here is something real. Lumera asked for authenticity. This is authenticity. Brandon cut in before I could continue. This is your interpretation of authenticity. The client has a different standard. And frankly, Ava, your direction may be too emotionally driven for what they need right now. Emotionally driven. It was a subtle insult, implying that my work came from instability rather than intention. I sat down slowly. There was no point pushing further. The decision had been made long before I walked into the room. 2 days later, I found out Brandon had sent Lumera a revised deck. Bright colors, smiling models, soft pastel rooms, the kind of ad that looked like it was generated by a marketing algorithm. My name was attached as creative lead, even though I had not seen a single frame of it. At the client meeting, I watched Lena Hart frown as she clicked through the deck. Lena was 38, sharp, calm, the kind of woman who could take a boardroom apart with one question. She stared at the slides, then looked up at all of us. Why is this different from the film Ava showed us last month? The room went silent. Brandon cleared his throat and adopted a sympathetic expression. Unfortunately, Ava's early cut was not strategically aligned. We had to shift direction to keep the messaging on track. The words landed like a punch, not strategically aligned, as if he was the one who understood women better than I did, as if the truth I fought for was nothing more than a careless mistake. I inhaled slowly and kept my face calm. There was no point pushing further. The decision had been made long before I walked into the room. After the meeting, I walked back to my car in the parking garage. The echo of my heels felt louder than usual. I sat behind the wheel and let the silence swallow me. The betrayal was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, calculated, and delivered with a smile. That night, in my West Hollywood apartment, I made tea and sat at my small kitchen table. I opened my laptop and pulled up the original video. The moment the first frame appeared, the woman in the car, breathing out after a long day, something inside me softened. This was truth. This is what women lived every day. This is what Lumera needed to show. So why was honesty the first thing they tried to bury? I watched the entire video without blinking. When it ended, I sat with the quiet that followed, feeling something shift inside me. It was not anger, it was recognition. A realization that what I had created deserved a life outside conference rooms and cautious executives. I closed the laptop gently. The night outside my window felt impossibly still, like Los Angeles was holding its breath with me. And that was where I paused, knowing the next step I took would change everything, even if I did not yet know how. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2. Cracks Beneath the Surface. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness behind my ribs that felt familiar in a way I wished it was not. The kind that reminded me of rooms I had stood in before. Rooms where truth was treated like a liability, and women like me were expected to smile through the erasure of our own work. I had lived 10 years in this industry, and every one of them had carried its own lesson in silence. As I stood in my kitchen waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, the memories came back in an uninvited rush. My first agency in New York, a crammed but ambitious studio where creative ideas lived fast and died even faster. I remember pitching a campaign about real postpartum skin for a wellness brand. The creative director at the time told me that women did not want to be reminded of their imperfections. He said they wanted aspiration, not honesty. That same week, a male colleague repackaged my idea with glossy lighting and a celebrity phase, and the board applauded him like he had discovered fire. By the time I moved to Los Angeles in 2016, I had learned how easily credit could be rewritten, how quickly the truth behind a campaign could be smudged away. I came to Orbit and Company with hope that things would be different, that a bigger agency meant bigger bravery. Instead, I found a different version of the same game, only the stakes were higher and the smiles more calculated. Brandon had always been part of that calculation. From the moment he joined as head of creative, he moved like a man who believed the room belonged to him by default. In the first campaign we worked on together, a fragrance project with a tight deadline, I stayed 3 nights in a row refining the narrative arc of the film. When it finally launched, my name appeared 6th in the credits, tucked beneath the production assistants, and Brandon gave a speech to the client about how his strategic oversight saved the entire project. I told myself to let it go, that I was being petty, that my time would come. It never quite did. Not until Lumira. Not until a video that felt more like a confession than a pitch. I showered, dressed, and drove to the office as if my life had not shifted overnight. Orbit sat in a glass building near Miracle Mile, a place where sunlight always found a way to fall, in harsh diagonal lines. When I walked in, a few people nodded politely. Others looked at me like something was brewing in the air around me, something they could not name yet. Emily passed me in the hallway, holding a stack of drafts. She was 24, but carried herself with the kind of careful awareness that came from knowing she was always being watched. She hesitated, then whispered, so softly it felt like a secret. Ava, I saw the early cut again last night. It made me cry. Women need that film. They need someone to tell the truth. Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. It was not the first time I had heard support for the original version, but it was the most sincere. It was the reminder I did not know I needed, proof that the world outside corporate walls was hungry for honesty. By noon, I received a meeting request. Urgent. Executive conference room. Mandatory attendance. My stomach tightened. Brandon and Claire would both be there. The subject line was brief, the way people make something sound simple when it will be anything but. I walked into the room to see Brandon already seated, arms crossed, pretending to look patient. Claire stood near the digital board, tapping absently through a slide deck. Neither smiled. I took my seat. The door closed with that soft click that somehow always sounded accusatory. Claire started speaking first. Her tone carried the polished calm of someone who had practiced sounding neutral. Ava, we are reviewing the direction of the Lumira project. There has been confusion around the deliverables and the messaging. We need to clarify responsibilities moving forward. Brandon leaned forward, fingers laced together. The current trajectory might not be the right fit for Ava's skill set. He paused just long enough to pretend he was being considerate.
Perhaps we need to reassign creative leadership to stabilize the client relationship. It took me a moment to process it. He was suggesting they remove me from the campaign entirely. He wanted the project he had already manipulated to become his own outright. I kept my voice steady. What part of my skill set is not aligned with the project? He smiled with a kind of practiced sympathy. You are very emotionally driven. This campaign requires someone more focused on deliverables and consistency. There it was again, the implication that honesty was disorder, that emotion was weakness. I felt heat rise up my neck, but forced it back down. I answered calmly. The original video connected with the client. The revised version is what caused confusion. If we want alignment, we should revisit what actually worked. Claire lifted her hand. We are not trying to place blame. We just need a structure that keeps the client confident. Maybe reallocating certain responsibilities will help. The phrase, certain responsibilities, was just another way of saying, we want this campaign, but without you complicating it. I held my breath for a moment, then said, if this is about safety, the safest choice is clarity, and clarity starts with acknowledging what actually happened. Brandon's jaw tightened. He was not used to being challenged so directly. His tone sharpened. This is not personal, Ava. We simply cannot risk a creative lead who is unpredictable. Unpredictable. Another subtle insult. Another attempt to paint me as unstable. I stood. Not abruptly, but with purpose. My voice stayed low. I am not unpredictable. I am consistent. You just don't like the direction I am consistent about. For a second, the room went completely still. Claire shifted her weight, unsure whether to intervene. I ended the conversation with a simple nod and walked out before either of them could reclaim the narrative. I knew when to stop talking. Sometimes silence was its own sharp edge. I returned to my office, closed the door, and let the quiet wrap around me. I needed air, so I opened the window slightly and sat at my desk, palms flat on the surface to steady myself. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. It contained a single image, a screenshot, an internal email from Brandon to the strategy team. The subject line accused me of compromising the stability of the campaign. The body of the email implied that I ignored direction, jeopardized revenue, and needed to be removed from future leadership consideration. For a moment, my hands went cold. It was not a creative disagreement. It was a coordinated attempt to erase me from the project and from the company's internal ecosystem. If that email circulated through the right people, I would be branded as difficult, emotional, unreliable. Labels that followed women in this industry like shadows. I sent back a short message to Emily thanking her. She replied immediately, "He should not get away with this." Her words were quiet on the screen, but fierce in spirit. The office felt different when I walked out again. Every conversation seemed to pause when I passed. Not because people disliked me, but because they sensed something was happening and no one wanted to become collateral damage by standing too close. I went into the editing room, one of the smaller ones on the 7th floor. It was empty at that hour. Lights low, the hum of the computer, the only sound. I sat in front of the large monitor and opened the original film again. The room flooded with the quiet tenderness of the first scene. A woman breathing out after holding everything in all day. The soft shake in her hands. the exhaustion in her eyes. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not rebellion, something steadier, something clearer. A knowing that the work deserved better than the boxes it was being forced into. This industry wanted
and quick optimism. But the world was shifting. Women were tired of pretending their lives were effortless, tired of ads that polished them into something unrecognizable. They were craving stories that met them where they already were. And in that moment, I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I could stay quiet, as I always had, letting the company shape the narrative while I stayed safely in the background. Or I could make a choice that was risky, maybe reckless, but honest. A choice that was not meant to destroy anyone, but to defend the truth I believed in. I closed the file, saving it carefully, then leaned back in the chair. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set behind the Los Angeles skyline, coloring everything in muted gold. It felt like the world was holding a question in the air, waiting for me to answer. My mind was calm. Too calm, maybe. Calm in the way a decision begins before it is spoken. I stood, clicked off the lights, and walked out of the editing room. I did not upload anything yet, but the decision, the real one, had already formed quietly and completely inside me. And that was enough for now. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The night it went viral. I left the building with a calm that felt almost detached, but the moment I stepped into my apartment later that night, the quiet pressed in on me again, and something inside finally shifted. I sat on the edge of my bed with the city humming faintly outside my window and opened the original video one more time. The tired woman in the car, the mother in the bathroom, the nurse rinsing her face as if rinsing off the world. I watched it without breathing. When it ended, I did not think, I just acted. At 1 a.m, I uploaded the film to my personal TikTok and Instagram accounts. No logo, no brand, no music added, no clever tags. I wrote a single caption. If honesty is not welcome in the boardroom, let it live where it is needed. Then I put my phone face down and crawled into bed before I could second-guess myself. I slept like someone who had already accepted the consequences. When I woke up 3 hours later, the room was still dark. I reached for my phone out of habit and froze. My notifications were stacked in endless rows. Messages, comments, shares, tags. The video had already reached 500,000 views. For a second, I thought it was a glitch. I opened the app and the counter kept ticking upward every time I blinked. I sat up slowly. My heartbeat felt loud in the quiet room. A message appeared from a woman in Wisconsin. She wrote that she had not slept in 2 days because her mother was sick and she was caring for 2 kids alone. She said the video made her feel seen for the first time in years. Another message came from a teacher in Arizona who said she cried in her car every afternoon before driving home because she was too exhausted to walk into her own house. Then a nurse in Florida sent a message saying the video looked exactly like her life after double shifts in the trauma ward. I read until my vision blurred. Each message felt like someone gently tapping on my shoulder, saying, I am here. I am tired too. Thank you for telling the truth. By noon, the video had crossed 3 million views. My phone buzzed so often I had to put it in a drawer just to breathe. The hashtag Real Women, Real Life was suddenly everywhere. Women filmed their own stories, their own exhaustion, their own quiet moments of falling apart and stitching themselves back together. It was raw and unpolished and beautiful in a way the industry never allowed. I made tea but barely tasted it. My hands were trembling with something between disbelief and relief. Around 12:30, my work email started filling with forwarded news alerts.
Orbit and Company was being asked to comment on a viral video that looked suspiciously like a high-budget advertisement. Reporters wanted to know if it was part of a larger campaign. Someone from an industry newsletter wrote to confirm the creative producers behind it. By the time I arrived at the office, the building felt tense. People whispered near the elevators. A few looked at me and quickly looked away as if afraid of being caught knowing something. My phone rang. It was Claire. Her voice was steady but heavy in a way that told me she already knew the answer to the question she was about to ask. She said my name quietly. Then she asked, "Did you post the video?" I said yes. She let out a long breath. She did not yell. She did not blame. She just said, "Come to my office this afternoon." When she hung up, the silence in my office felt too small for my lungs. I sat down, trying to steady myself. Part of me expected panic or guilt or fear. None of it came. I just felt an odd clarity, like a curtain had finally been pulled back. I did not have long to breathe. 10 minutes later, Brandon stormed into my office without knocking. His voice was sharper than I had ever heard it. He said, "You have put the entire company at risk." I kept my eyes on him, steady. What risk? His jaw shifted in irritation. Legal is already on high alert. PR is calling me every 5 minutes. HR has requested information because this could be a breach of contract. I asked, "How is honesty a breach of contract?" He stepped closer. His face was red. "You took proprietary material and leaked it publicly." I answered calmly, "It was not branded content. It had no logo, no mention of Lumera, no proprietary assets. It was footage I shot, nothing more." Brandon ran a hand through his hair. "You are reckless. The board is furious. You have no idea how much damage you have caused." Before I could respond, Emily knocked lightly on the open door. She looked nervous, but determined. She said softly, "They want you in the conference room in 10 minutes. Brandon glared at her, then at me, then left without another word. Emily stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She lowered her voice. "People are talking. The client has been calling nonstop. They want to see the original video, not the revised one. Yours." I felt a surprising calmness. "Thank you for letting me know." She hesitated, then added, "You did the right thing, Ava." When she hung up, I allowed myself one deep breath before heading to the conference room. The hallway felt a little like the quiet before a storm. The meeting was shorter than I expected. Claire sat across from me. Her expression was difficult to read. She said, "Lumera wants to review your original version. They said the one that went viral is exactly the tone they were looking for." Brandon interrupted her. "We have lost control of the narrative. Ava acted irresponsibly, and I recommend disciplinary review until we contain this." Claire raised her hand sharply. "Enough." She turned back to me. "I need transparency from you. Was this intentional?" I answered with no hesitation. Yes, because the version that was submitted did not reflect the truth of the client's brief or their audience. Claire looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Lumera wants to schedule a call by end of day. They requested you specifically." For the first time all afternoon, Brandon looked genuinely stunned. After the meeting, I walked back to my office in a daze. The hallway buzzed with energy, whispers, and updates. People were watching the situation unfold in real time. As I sat down, my phone buzzed with a different kind of alert. A tag from a major beauty influencer based in New York. Someone with over 3 million followers. She had posted a video reaction to my film. She sat in her apartment with tears in her eyes, hand pressed over her heart. She said the video felt like the first honest piece of beauty content she had seen in years. She said if any brand had the courage to put this message out publicly, she would buy from them without question. The video had already hit 1 million views. 10 minutes later, every entertainment and beauty news outlet picked it up. Beauty Talk on TikTok placed the film at the #1 trending spot. It was no longer a quiet ripple in a corner of the internet. It was a wave, a loud one. I leaned back in my chair, trying to absorb what was happening. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold. The film had slipped out of my hands and into the world, and the world had embraced it in a way I never seen coming. As the office grew louder with conversations and chatter, my email pinged again. This time, it was not from PR or HR or internal chatter. It was from Lumera Skin's brand team. The subject line was simple: a request for a private meeting. The body of the message was even simpler. They wanted to meet with me directly to discuss the future of the campaign. They had not copied Orbit and Company. They had not copied Claire. They had not copied Brandon. The message was addressed only to me. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 4: When the Brand Chose Truth. I drove to Santa Monica with the kind of steadiness that did not match what was happening inside my chest. The morning sun was rising over the coast, turning everything soft and gold, but my thoughts were sharp, cutting through the quiet of my car. I kept replaying the email from Lumera's brand team: a private meeting. No Orbit and Company copied. No corporate buffer. Just me. It felt unreal, like stepping into a version of my career I had imagined but never expected to live. The Lumera building sat a few blocks from the beach, glass and pale stone with palm trees lining the entrance. When I walked inside, the receptionist greeted me with a warm smile and told me that the team was already waiting upstairs. My heels clicked lightly against the floor as I followed her to the elevator, each step grounding me, reminding me that I belonged here no matter what Orbit had tried to convince me of. When the elevator doors opened, I was led into a conference room facing floor-to-ceiling windows. The ocean stretched out beyond the glass, calm and endless. Lena Hart stood near the center of the room, her posture straight, her expression focused. A few other members of the Lumera team sat around the long table, hands clasped, eyes curious. Lena turned when she saw me. "Ava, thank you for coming." Her voice carried both calm and intent. I nodded politely and took a seat, placing my phone face down on the polished surface. I noticed an HDMI cable already connected to the screen on the wall. My original video was paused on the first frame, the woman in the car lit by dim interior lighting. Lena looked at the team, then back at me. "We will watch the entire piece again, no commentary until it finishes." The lights dimmed slightly. Someone pressed play. The room sank into silence for 90 full seconds. I had seen this video hundreds of times, but sitting there with Lumera's entire leadership team watching it was different. I felt every breath of the women on screen, every quiet moment of fatigue and self-compassion. The air changed around us. Even the room's hum softened, as if leaning in. When the last frame faded to black, the silence lingered. No one moved. No one reached for their notes. Then Lena spoke. "This is the one." She stepped forward, her voice firm. "Only this version carries truth." The words settled over me like warm water. I exhaled slowly, almost without meaning to. One of the team members nodded. Another wiped the corner of her eye. No one questioned Lena. Her tone carried finality.
Before I could say anything, the door swung open and Brandon walked in with Claire close behind him. He had clearly rushed over. His tie was loose, his expression tight, and the moment he saw the paused frame on the screen, his jaw clenched. He forced a smile and walked toward the table. "Glad we are all aligned," he said too brightly. "The team put a lot of effort into crafting a vision that feels both fresh and audience-focused." Lena's eyes sharpened. "Your team did not create this. Let us not pretend otherwise." Brandon faltered but tried to recover. "We all collaborate closely at Orbit. Credit naturally belongs to multiple hands." This film was not made by multiple hands. This film has a clear voice. We know whose voice that is. Brandon swallowed. It was the first time I had seen him truly thrown off balance. Claire stepped in gently. "We are all here to support Lumera's needs. Our internal process can be clarified later." Lena folded her arms. "There is no clarifying. Ava's version is the only one that reflects our brand. We want the campaign built from this cut. No alterations, no color tone changes, no diluted message." Brandon's jaw tightened. "We can produce a refined version if you feel it needs polish." "It does not need polish, it needs protection." Her words hit the table like a gavel. She walked over to the screen and tapped the first frame. "This is what our audience responds to. Women are exhausted by curated perfection. They want honesty. They want something real. And frankly, Orbit made a mistake trying to bury it." I felt a small shock of relief, then a pulse of something like vindication. Not rage, not triumph, just the quiet realization that someone finally understood. Claire cleared her throat softly. "What specific direction would you like us to take going forward?" "We want Ava, and only Ava. She will have full creative control, complete authority over production, no other oversight." The room froze. Brandon looked like he had been slapped. He said sharply, "That is not how agency structuring works." "It is how this campaign will work," Lena replied. Claire tried a calmer approach. "Lumera is an essential partner to our agency. We hear your preference, but there are internal protocols regarding creative leads. We would need to discuss adjustments." "No," Lena said. "If Orbit wants to keep the contract, Ava is the creative lead. Executive level, no interference. No Brandon, no revisions that sanitize her intent, and no corporate smoothing." Claire hesitated. "That is a very specific request. We are a very specific brand, and we know exactly what we want." Brandon let out a strained laugh. "You can't expect us to let one director run $1 million campaign without collaboration." Lena turned her head slowly. "Brandon, we saw the revised deck. We know who was compromising the message, and we know who was protecting it." He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. His face reddened. Claire exhaled and nodded once, accepting reality. "We will honor your request." The room fell into a brief silence. Lena turned to me again. "Ava, are you willing to lead this campaign the way you originally envisioned?" I felt the weight of her words settle into place. "Yes," I said softly. Brandon stepped forward as if trying one last time to regain control. "With respect, this project is too large for one person. Ava cannot handle every component alone." I looked at him calmly. "I will not be alone." He frowned. "And who exactly will be supporting you?" Emily's face flashed in my mind, her quiet strength, her conviction, her courage in sending me that screenshot even though it put her at risk. I knew instantly what I wanted to do. I want Emily Rhodes as co-director, I said. Claire blinked, surprised. Emily is junior. She has never led a project of this size. She understands the heart of this campaign. She sees the truth in it. That matters more than experience on paper. Lena nodded. We support that. Brandon's face twisted. This is absurd. Claire shot him a warning look. This is what the client wants, and what the client wants is final. He fell silent, his arms crossed tightly as if holding himself together. The meeting ended shortly after. Claire stayed behind with Lumera's team to discuss logistics, while I gathered my bag and stepped out into the hallway. My hands were steady, my breath moved easily. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard someone call my name. Emily emerged from the waiting area down the hall, holding her phone with wide, anxious eyes. She asked, "How did it go? Did they like your cut?" I smiled, something soft and sure. They want it. They want all of it. She blinked, stunned. All of it. I added that they wanted us to make the final version together, you and me. Her breath caught. Me? But I'm junior. Not anymore, I said. Her eyes filled, not quite tears, but something bright. She nodded once, then again, trying to process it all. We rode the elevator down together. When the doors opened, the warm Santa Monica wind met us. The sky was soft with late afternoon light, casting gentle gold over the courtyard. Emily looked at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. What happens now? I looked toward the sunlight, feeling the weight of the moment settle into something solid.
Now, I said, we make the film the right way. And together we stepped out into the evening light, the door closing behind us with a quiet certainty that felt like the beginning of something entirely new. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 5. When Truth Became Power. The days that followed moved quickly, but not in the frantic way Orbit and Compass had trained me to expect. This time, the pace felt purposeful. Lumera approved the production schedule almost immediately, and within a week, Emily and I were standing inside a studio in Santa Monica, surrounded by camera rigs, soft natural lighting panels, and a team that finally understood the tone we were aiming for. The space smelled faintly of coffee and fresh wood from the newly built set pieces, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a grounded certainty settle in my chest. We had cast women who reflected the lives we wanted to honor. A 40-year-old office worker who came straight from her morning commute, still carrying the soft stress of a full inbox. A 50-year-old mother who admitted she rarely looked at herself in the mirror anymore, except for quick glances while brushing her teeth. A 28-year-old Black nurse finishing an overnight shift from a community hospital. None of them were actors. They did not know how to pose or deliver scripted emotions. They only knew how to be themselves, which was exactly what we needed. Emily stepped beside me as the crew prepared the first shot. She said quietly, "Ava, she looks nervous. Maybe we should talk to her for a minute." She pointed to the office worker who was sitting on the floor leaning against the studio wall, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I nodded and walked over, kneeling down so we were eye level. I asked her, "How are you feeling?" She let out a nervous laugh. A little terrified. I have never been on a set before. I do not really know what to do. I told her gently, "You do not need to do anything. Just be who you already are. That is the whole point of this. You are the story, not the set,
not the lights. You. Her shoulders relaxed, and she smiled, small and sincere. Thank you. That helps. When I walked back to the monitor, Emily glanced at me with something like admiration. She said quietly, Ava, you make people feel safe. Not a lot of creatives do that. Her words caught me off guard. I looked at her and saw the confidence she had not possessed when we first met, the quiet fire she carried now. I replied, safety is where honesty starts. Without it, nothing true can survive. The first take began. It was simple. The office workers sitting at a desk, the soft glow of afternoon light hitting her face. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. The kind of moment most advertisements would cut away from, but we let the camera linger on it. Her exhaustion was not dramatic. It was gentle, lived in, familiar. The crew stayed silent. Emily watched her with the focus of someone who understood the gravity of small truths. Throughout the day, Emily led several scenes herself. She gently guided the mother through a quiet sequence of looking into a mirror after dinner, hands resting on the sink, eyes softening as she saw herself. Emily's voice stayed warm and encouraging. When you look up, do not pretend to feel confident. Just look at the woman you see. That is enough. Later, she directed the nurse in the bathroom set, capturing the subtle shake in her hands as she washed her face. None of us spoke when the take ended. We just watched her breathe, watched the way she seemed to reclaim herself in that slow, steady moment. As we wrapped for the day, Lena stopped by the studio for a quick check-in. She watched a few clips on the monitor, her expression unreadable at first, then slowly melting into something unmistakably satisfied. She looked at me and said, "This is exactly right. This is the tone I wanted for Lumira years ago. I'm glad it's finally happening." Her approval felt grounding, not intoxicating, like stepping onto solid ground after months of uncertainty. The weeks that followed were full, but steady. Editing sessions ran late into the evenings, yet they did not carry the frantic energy of past campaigns. Working with Emily felt unexpectedly effortless. She had an instinct for what to keep and what to cut, and she knew exactly when a shot needed air instead of embellishment. The final cut was delivered at the start of October. Lumira approved it within 48 hours and scheduled the launch for mid-month. When the film went live, everything moved fast again. 15 million views in the first week. Social media flooded with women sharing their own stories. The hashtag #RealWomenRealLife appeared on morning news shows. A segment ran on a Los Angeles station discussing authenticity in advertising and naming Lumira as the brand leading the shift. I opened an article on Vogue Business and saw my name, not buried in the credits, but highlighted. Los Angeles Times ran a feature calling the campaign a return to honesty. It was surreal, a kind of quiet triumph. Not loud, not vengeful, not spiteful, just right. Orbit and Company had no choice but to lean into the success. The board issued a statement praising the campaign's groundbreaking authenticity, carefully avoiding any mention of the internal conflict that had preceded it. But executives noticed what had happened behind the scenes. Complaints about Brandon's conduct accumulated, and within a month, he was reassigned to a smaller satellite office in San Diego. Not fired, not publicly shamed, just moved. A shift subtle enough to protect his reputation, but firm enough to send a message. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only closure. He had built his career on control and appearances, and the truth had simply outpaced him. That was enough. One evening, a few days after the campaign's peak, I sat at my kitchen counter sorting through emails. One caught my eye. It was from a woman in Ohio, aged 52. She wrote that she watched the film in her kitchen after a long day. She said the moment the woman in the video placed her hand on the mirror, She placed her own hand on hers, mirroring her. She said it made her stop for a minute, breathe, and remember she deserved gentleness. She thanked me for giving her that. I read her message twice, then again. I closed my laptop afterward because nothing else that day could possibly matter more. Her words stayed in my chest long after the screen went dark. A few nights later, I drove to the beach in Santa Monica. The sky was washed in the last orange of sunset, fading into quiet purple. The waves moved in slow, calming rhythms. I slipped off my shoes and stood at the edge of the shore, letting the water curl around my ankles. The air carried that familiar cool salt that always made me feel both small and expansive. I watched the horizon, letting the entire journey settle inside me. The rejection, the fear, the silence, the risk, the truth finally finding its voice, and all the women who saw themselves in it. For the first time in my career, I felt no pressure to prove anything. I felt no need to defend my decisions or justify my perspective. The world had spoken for me. And in that quiet, I finally felt free. I took a slow breath and let it go, feeling the last of the weight leave my shoulders. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like something deeper, like alignment, like returning to myself. My voice in the final film had said something that felt truer now than ever. Sometimes you don't need to fight anyone. You just choose the truth and let the world make its decision. If you have ever stood between truth and safety, between what is expected of you and what's real inside you, I hope you know you're not alone. And if you have a story like that, I'd like to hear it. The tide rolled in gently, touching my toes again, and the last light of the day slipped beyond the water as I stood there, finally at peace with the path that had brought me here.